All right. Welcome, everyone. I see participants joining our webinar this evening. Thank you all for taking time out of your evening to participate in this webinar. We're going to be talking about going solar on your farm or rural small business with USDA Rural Energy for America program funding. So I hope that is why you all are here, because that is what we are going to be talking about. And this webinar is being presented by Solar United Neighbors, and I will tell you more about us and who we are. But first, I want to open up with some housekeeping. As you're joining, you can join from your computer through the Zoom app and use your computer mic and speakers for computer audio. You can also choose telephone audio and dial in using the information provided in the Zoom RSVP invitation. There are a lot of folks participating in this webinar this evening, so I will ask you to submit questions through the chat feature. And you'll see that in the screen, there's a series of options on your screen, and you should be able to send questions via chat. You can choose to send your questions to the panelists or to the panelists and attendees. And if you choose panelists and attendees, then everyone who is in this webinar will see the questions you've asked, so you can be a little more participatory that way. We're gonna collect the questions and hold them until the end of the webinar. I think a lot of questions will be answered as we go through our presentations. Hopefully that will happen. And then hopefully we'll have time to answer audience questions at the end. This webinar will be recorded, and we will be sharing a link to the recording after the webinar is completed. So if you're not able to attend to the end, or if you know folks who might be interested but weren't able to be here live tonight, you'll be able to share that link after we complete this evening. Okay. And who we've got here today, we have quite a lineup of presenters for you. My name is Autumn Long. I am a regional field director with Solar United Neighbors. I am based in West Virginia, and I oversee our field programs here in West Virginia, as well as Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and Minnesota. And I'm very excited to have presenters representing all of those states with us this evening. We have Sarah Conley-Ballou from Rural Action in Ohio, Fritz Ebiger, sorry, every time, from the Clean Energy Resource Teams in Minnesota, Jesse Gandy, a USDA Rural Development Rural Business Service Specialist and Energy Coordinator from West Virginia, Rory Piermati, a USDA Rural Development Loan Specialist from Pennsylvania, and Christy Sutherland with Prosperity Ag based in Indiana. So thank you all for being here. I really appreciate your time. We're gonna run this in 3 sections. I'm gonna talk through some really basic Solar 101 technology information to get us all on the same page about solar and what we mean when we talk about solar. And I'll talk briefly about the USDA REAP program, and then each speaker will go into more detail about USDA REAP and their work in each of their states. And again, anytime you have questions, share them via the chat function, and at the end, we'll have time to sort through those and address some questions that may have come up. So without further ado, we'll start with some basic Solar 101 technology. And when we talk about solar, we're essentially talking about solar photovoltaics, or PV. And this is a technology that converts solar energy into electricity. So a solar panel or module is one of our system components that we're dealing with solar PV. Each panel is made up of a series of solar cells, mainly composed of silicon, and they're actually doing that work of converting sunlight into electricity. The solar cells are wired together into a panel or module. They're encapsulated in tempered glass, surrounded by a steel or aluminum framing, and then each module is strung together in turn to create what we refer to as a solar array. Another main component of a solar PV system is called an inverter. An inverter is a piece of equipment that converts the direct current or DC electricity that solar panels create into the alternating current or AC electricity that is used by standard appliances and electronic devices in this country. So the inverter makes that DC to AC conversion. It also performs system monitoring functions and ensures that your solar panels are integrated with your home and the electric grid. There are a couple different types of inverters. I'm not going to get deep into the details of inverter technology, but that's something that if you all have questions about at the end, we can talk more about details of solar technology. And the third main component of a solar PV system is the racking. This is what connects your panels to your roof and holds the weight of the equipment. There are racking solutions for many different roof types, asphalt shingles, as you see here. This is a standing seam metal roof, and racking with these can be completed without roof penetrations in some cases. The racking can clip onto the seams. And we've got flat roof solutions for flat commercial roofs. And if your roof is not suitable for solar or you want to do something different, ground mounted solar is also an option. So we have a lovely ground mounted array with pollinator habitat here. And when you're thinking about solar, especially if you're thinking about a roof mounted system, there are a few considerations to keep in mind. One is the direction your roof faces. Solar works best with a south-facing roof. That's really the ideal direction. It gets the most hours of sun over the course of the day, over the course of the year. However, east and west-facing roof lines can also work well for solar, especially as solar panels have become more efficient over the years. We see more and more that east and west-facing roofs work well for solar. North-facing roofs are not recommended for solar in the Northern Hemisphere. It just doesn't get enough direct sunlight. Another consideration is, of course, shading. Solar panels work best in full sun. So if you are in a heavily shaded location, your roof might not be ideal for solar. And then the third consideration is just the actual physical space you have available. You know, ideally, you may be able to offset up to 100% of your annual electric costs with on-site solar, but the physical space you have available on your site or your roof may be a limiting factor, depending on your energy loads and consumption needs. So those are things to keep in mind as you think about going solar. And how does this all work together? So we talked about the solar panels. They're strung together into the array. They create that DC current that flows through the inverter and gets converted into current. That alternating current then flows through your electric service panel to help power the appliances and equipment and electronic devices in your business or your barn or your home or your shop. And whatever excess energy is being created by your panels at that given time that's not consumed on site is then flows out through your electric meter into the local electric system and helps power the neighbors' homes or the next business down the street from you. So by going solar, you are becoming an electricity producer. You're not just passively consuming electricity anymore, you're actually contributing to the production of your local electric grid. And the really good part is that you get credited for that through a policy known as net metering. Net metering allows your utility to track the flow of electricity to and from a customer. So as a solar producer, when you generate more energy than you're using on site, that extra electricity flows out through your meter and you receive a credit for that on your electric bill for that excess energy production. Depending on where you're located and the policies in your state and your utility district, that credit will roll over from one month to the next, potentially offsetting your overall annual electric consumption. Net metering looks different in different places and different utility companies. So we won't dive deep into any detailed net metering policies for specific utility districts tonight. But if you have questions about that for your local area, you can refer to our website, solarunitedneighbors.org, or some of the speakers that are going to be presenting tonight will probably be able to help you if you live in one of the states represented by the speakers in tonight's presentation. But in general, the bottom line is you offset your electric consumption with the value of your solar energy production, thus making it a great investment and a great way to lower your energy bills. One thing I want to mention quickly is about power outages and battery storage. If the grid power goes out and you have a simple grid-tied solar system, your solar system will shut down. Your inverter has a safety mechanism that automatically shuts down your system when the grid is down in order to prevent backfeeding into the local utility grid and potentially injuring someone who's working to repair the problem. So in other words, you're producing energy on site with solar, but you're not storing energy in your solar panels. If you want on-site stored energy during grid outages, you're going to need the addition of a storage component or batteries to your system. You might want to consider solar plus storage if you are in a location where you experience frequent utility outages. If you have critical loads like well pumps or refrigeration equipment that are essential to your business, if you are concerned about emergency preparedness, these are all valid reasons to invest in solar plus storage. It does increase the cost significantly, but it's becoming more and more popular, and it is eligible for USDA funding, so that is an option. I'll answer a few frequently asked questions that we always hear about solar, and then at the end of our presentation, if there are remaining questions about solar technology, we can circle back to that. Solar is a long-term investment. Systems last for 25, 30 or more years. Solar panels are warranted for 25 to 30 years. That's industry standard. And so you can expect your solar panels to be producing energy for you for decades into the future. There's no reason why they will stop working after that 25 or 30-year warranty time expires either. Inverters are warranted for between 10 and 25 years, depending on the type. And the installer who completes your project will warranty their labor, including any roof penetrations that are made as part of the installation. So you'll have warranties for each of those aspects of the installation. And your property insurance will cover any sort of like natural disaster, tree falls, a storm, and the addition of solar should not greatly increase your insurance rates. If your insurance company decides to really kick your rates up drastically, I would encourage you to shop around and find some more competitive property insurance. One last thing I want to mention is the question of maintenance. Solar PV is a very low maintenance type of project for a property owner. There really are no moving parts. There's nothing to break or need maintenance. Once the installation is completed, your solar panels just sit there and make energy for you. In most areas of the country, we get enough natural precipitation and rainfall to clean the panels on a regular basis. Depending on where you're located, you may want to occasionally clean the dirt and grime that builds up on your panels. Snow removal is another issue that can be addressed through maintenance, or you can be patient and wait for the snow to slide off of your panels, which is another option. So those are just a few brief insights into solar technology. And moving on, oh, whoops, going too fast here. So moving on into the main topic of our webinar tonight, I just want to give a brief background into the USDA Rural Energy for America program, and then each of our presenters will dive deeper into aspects of that program to really shine a light on the opportunity it represents. So what is USDA REAP? It is a program of USDA Rural Development, and you can follow these links, which will be available in the recording of this broadcast, to find out more about USDA Rural Development and the REAP program. It's authorized by Title IX, also known as the Energy Title of the USDA Farm Bill, which was reauthorized in 2018 with mandatory funding for REAP through 2023. And the purpose is really to increase energy independence, to increase the private sector supply of renewable energy, and decrease energy demand through energy efficiency improvements. So that's the reason this program was created and exists. REAP provides guaranteed loan financing up to 75% of eligible project costs. And it also provides grant funding, which is the main topic that we're going to explore this evening. REAP grant funding covers up to 25% of total eligible project costs. There are minimum and maximum project sizes for renewable energy grants. It's a $2,500 minimum and $500 maximum. Energy efficiency grants, the funding is a $1,500 minimum and $250,000 maximum. There's also an option to combine grant and loan funding up to 75% of your project cost. REAP eligibility extends to rural small businesses, and the definition of rurality in the eyes of the USDA is based on US Census designations. So the small business must be located in an area with a population of less than 50,000, and there are other eligibility criteria about the business income and size. With agricultural producers, eligibility requires 50% of income coming from agricultural operations, and that can be located in non-rural as well as rural areas. You can go to the USDA website and check your address to see if you're considered rural in USDA criteria. REAP funds can be used for renewable energy systems, and renewable energy encompasses a really wide array of technologies, some pretty interesting stuff. Biomass, geothermal, small hydropower, hydrogen, wind, solar, and ocean energy generation. REAP funds can also be used for energy efficiency improvements, so HVAC systems, insulation, lighting, refrigeration, doors and windows, pumps, switching out diesel to electric irrigation, replacing energy inefficient equipment. So a lot of things fall under this energy efficiency improvement category. Because we're Solar United Neighbors and we work in solar, we're mainly talking about the solar aspect of REAP tonight, but I want to make you all aware that these options also exist with REAP funding. And with that, I will stop talking and turn it over to our panelists. And we are going to start with, I lined everyone up in alphabetical order. So we're starting with Sarah Conley-Ballou, Sustainable Energy Solutions Program Director with Rural Action from Ohio. So take it away, Sarah.
Okay, thanks, Autumn. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great, okay. Hi, everyone. As Autumn said, my name is Sarah Conley-Ballou. I work in Appalachian, Ohio for Rural Action. And today we'll be looking at some of the benefits of the rural energy, the USDA REAP funding. And I'll talk some about how we work on this under this funding here in Ohio. Go ahead and advance the slide, please. Briefly, just want to explain Rural Action as an organization. We are a nonprofit based in Southeast Ohio, the Appalachian region of Ohio, We were founded in 1991, and our work focuses on building a more just economy through environmental and social and economic programs and initiatives that spans the gamut from local food to zero waste and sustainable agriculture. And we are a very diverse organization. I run our Sustainable Energy Solutions program. Go ahead and advance the slide here. Our program has been part of Rural Action since 2018. And I know you can't read all the words on this slide, but our program connects people to the resources that they need to reduce their energy use and work towards renewable energy solutions. We have a number of initiatives, REAP grant writing services being one of them. You're welcome to visit our website, ruralaction.org. Okay, commercial over. Now we can get into the good stuff. So I think I started writing REAP grants in about 2017. Prior to coming to Rural Action, I worked for Upgrade Ohio, and we realized the need for REAP grant writing services in our local region because there was a real resource gap, especially for low to moderate income homeowners, farmers, and small businesses. And so Rural Action has been providing REAP grant writing technical assistance and services to anyone who reaches out and is in need. You can go on to the next slide here. So we've worked on, I think, about 15 different projects to date. I thought I'd give a snapshot of several of those projects. They span the gamut from poultry farm operations, a rural car sales dealership. We worked with a trailer sales company. That's what's focused in the picture there. Each project is unique, as you probably are aware with most solar projects. Finances are unique, the roof aspect, the generation needs and electric needs really vary quite a bit. So any small business or agricultural producer that's looking at a REAP grant really there are many qualifications and a lot of, it's not a one size fits all opportunity. Go on to the next slide here. So Autumn did a great job of providing an overview of the USDA REAP grant, how it works, who qualifies, and what small business or agricultural producers need to do to apply. I thought I'd spend a few minutes talking about the evaluation process. The USDA uses a standardized scorecard, and though it's not an all-inclusive list here, these are the major factors that are used to evaluate applications and the number of points that are awarded for each. The quantity of energy generated from the system, this refers to the percentage of electricity used by your farm or your business that your system might generate. A good example would be that if you used 100,000 kilowatt hours of electricity a year and you install enough solar to produce 90,000 kilowatts a year, then the quantity of energy that's generated from the system would be 90%. A 90% system is relatively high energy replacement, so that would qualify for about 15 points on the evaluation metric. The lower the replacement value, the lower the point total might be. So that's one of the criteria. Second criteria would be the commitment of funds. So this has to do with the funding of the project and how much funding you may have secured. If you've secured 100% of the funds required for your system, you score 20 points. If it's less than 100%, you score 0 points. And so it's necessary that you demonstrate to the USDA that you can cover 100% of the project cost. However, if you're applying for a grant for 25% of the project's cost, you only need funds for 75%. So that's a important tip. Another criteria is that previous grantees are evaluated. If you've never received a REAP grant before, you receive a 15-point score. If you are applying 2 or more years after you receive the grant, that's a 5-point score. If you're applying within 2 years of receiving the grant, you get a 0-point score for that. So the more the new recipients, or I'm sorry, new applicants score highest under that category. USDA is also going to look at the simple payback period. They'll evaluate the application based on how long it will take an owner to pay off the cost of the system. So it'll only factor in the savings from the reduced utility electric. It doesn't take into account any additional incentives like the solar investment tax credit, for example, or depreciation, or any state or local incentives that may apply. So those points are less than 10 years in a payback period. You score as high as 15 points. If your payback period is between 10 and 15 years, that's only 10-point score. If your payback is between 15 and 25 years, you'll receive a 5-point score. And typically, if your payback period is more than 25 years, you might reevaluate your project altogether, but you will not receive any points in that category. The environmental benefits category just judges your project based on the solar system's environmental impact. The points are awarded based on resource conservation, public health, and the environment. There's also state director points that can be awarded based on the discretion of your state director or administrator. They can give up to 10%, or sorry, up to 10 points on a project based on their discretion. And then the final area that they look at is the size of a REAP funding request. All grant requests that are less than $250,000 are awarded 10 points. Requests over that $250,000 threshold or more do not receive points in that section. So I bring all of this up because it is quite important at the outset of a REAP application to really think about what will be graded with your application. This is what the USDA looks at. I do a pre-review scorecard with every client that asks for a REAP grant preparation service, just to look through each of these items, and then we stop and kind of evaluate whether the project is viable. So that's an important thing to do. Go ahead, Autumn, to the next slide, please. Thanks. The other thing I wanted to touch on was the USDA REAP grant rounds. So if you're applying to the REAP grant, there are 2 times a year that you can submit your application. These periods are referred to as rounds. Round 1, the fall round, occurs in October. Round 2 is the spring round, and it's at the end of March. Selecting the right round is pretty crucial to your chances of getting the grant. You don't just want to apply to the round that's sooner for you, because the rules are a little different for each round, and you can only apply 1 time per project. I'm going to advance the slide, please. Thanks. So round 1, because the USDA's fiscal year starts on October 1st and ends September 30th, the fall round is the first round of the year. This round is for grant applications of $20,000 or less. If you enter in round 1, you'll have 5 chances to receive a REAP grant. While applications entering in round 1 can progress through all the rounds in the year, applications entered in round 2 only progress through the spring round. And then applications entered for the first time in the spring round will not be entered in the following year's fall round. Do you want to go to the next slide, please? Thanks. And then a few months later in March is round 2, and that's our spring round. If you're interested in a grant that's over $20,000, this will be the round that you'll want to apply for. Entering in round 2, you'll get 3 chances if your grant is for $20,000 or less, and 2 chances if your grant amount is over $20,000. It's good to note that for energy efficiency projects, the minimum grant, you talked about this earlier about grant amounts of the minimum is $15,000, the maximum is $250,000. And if your application was not approved in the fall round, you move on to the fall reserve. You can go on to the next slide if you'd like. I wanted to share that, you know, applying for a REAP grant really is a long process. It does take quite a lot of paperwork, and there are many steps. It's good to have consultation as you do it. The USDA's state representatives are usually incredibly helpful, and we found that, you know, working with a business or ag producer is really a beneficial process for them to learn as they go. So we're here to help, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have at the outset. I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Appreciate that. And Sarah's contact information is there on the screen. You can also refer to the recording if we need to get back to you at a later date. So thanks for sharing all of that. And we're going to move on now to Fritz Ebiger of Rural Energy Development Program Manager with the Clean Energy Resource Teams at University of Minnesota Extension. So take it away, Fritz.
Hi. I just had to tell my daughter to stay out of this room. I'm Fritz Ebinger. Like Autumn said, I work for the University of Minnesota Extension. Advance the slide just one time for me. I work for the University of Minnesota Extension in the Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships in a program called the Clean Energy Resource Teams. And CERT is actually a partnership of the Minnesota Department of Commerce, a policymaking body called the Great Plains Institute, and one of our legacy partners called the Southwest Regional Development Commission, which is the first region in the state of Minnesota that saw wind energy in the mid-90s and early 2000s. So our job primarily is to connect individuals and communities to the resources they need to do clean energy projects. I in particular focus on solar energy with farms and rural small businesses. Next slide, please. I'll be trying to be quick. This is how we work. It's kind of based off of a soil and water conservation district model, but we have several regions throughout the state, and each region has a regional coordinator who is guided by steering committees. And those steering committees are made up of any range of people. Some of them are business owners, some of them are county commissioners, some of them are rural electric cooperative staff. It's just a range of folks, but the point is that they are part of those communities and they feed that information up to the university. And rather than, you know, the old style model was the university did the research and delivered the information to the community. So we want to have a two-way conversation in community. Next slide, please. I'll be real quick about the USDA REAP stuff since you already heard Autumn and Sarah talk about it. I'll talk to you about a policy in Minnesota that has worked really well. It's called PACE. It stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. And then I will discuss briefly some tax matters that I think are relevant to small businesses and farms. Next slide. First things first, I'm waiting for another child to pop through that door any minute. First things first, efficiency is always going to be your best spend. It's always going to be the lowest cost option. It's going to help you reduce your energy load profile. So any kind of renewable energy project becomes a little bit smaller, a little bit cheaper. It's usually easier to finance as well. And then the opportunities you also want to think through, like what is your most heavily used lighting, basic fan and motor maintenance, occupancy sensors, and so forth, and behavior change. And I bring this up because oftentimes I'll go out to a farm or business and they'll talk to me about doing solar, and I'll take a look around, and in about 5 minutes I can size up, they still have old incandescent bulbs, or they'll have high pressure sodium bulbs in their operation. I just tell them right away, like, that's where you want to spend your money first. But anyway, just think about efficiency first. Next slide, please. As Autumn and Sarah already said, that's all the information you need to know about USDA rural development. So I'm going to skip this slide. Thank you. So we'll talk about PACE. So Minnesota has a program called Property Assessed Clean Energy. And essentially, it's a way to finance building energy efficiency and renewable energy upgrades. And what it is a loan that you take out and then you repay as a separate line item on your property tax bill. This is just a simple photo that we had of an LED lighting project that was done in an aviation company up in Bemidji, Minnesota, which is right by the headwaters of the Mississippi River. That was back in the day when LED lamps were a little bit more expensive, but it's an easy way for this company to improve the environment for their employees and also save some money. Next slide, please. So PACE is obviously not part of REAP, but I'll get to that point. So things that you can finance with PACE is energy efficiency, HVAC lighting equipment, insulation, definitely solar, which we're here to talk about tonight, and then also electric vehicle charging stations. Next slide, please. So I'll give you the nuts and bolts and I'll get to the punchline, but basically the property owner selects the project, reduces their energy cost. The St. Paul Port Authority, which is the economic development agency here in Minnesota, finances the improvement once they look through the application and see that everything is in place. And then the county adds the property tax assessment to a tax roll. So it does attach to title. And then the owner pays back the assessment for a period of up to 20 years, but more often than not, it's only 10. Most people take out a 10-year schedule on a 4.25% rate right now. The reason it becomes a tax lien is because obviously the county wants to secure its position in terms of lien priority, but it's a way to leverage the property appraised value that you have without having to lay out any cash or go to a private bank to do that. Next slide, please. Like I said, you got business and manufacturing, multifamily housing, agriculture, nonprofits, and places of worship. Agriculture is really critical because oftentimes farmers have a ton of equity built up in their land, and they may not have the cash to buy a solar installation or finance a solar installation. PACE was basically a lever that they were able to pull to make those projects happen, and we've seen that happen quite a bit in Minnesota. The point I was trying to make about PACE is that oftentimes people cannot, it's okay, you can skip to the next slide. I'm just going to talk off topic. So Sarah mentioned that you want to be able to show 100% of that financial backing to do a project to get all the points in that category. What we've seen a lot of farmers and rural businesses do is use PACE to pull out that money to show that 100% backing. And through a combination of PACE and REAP, they've made their REAP applications really attractive, and many of them have done really well in the REAP program. So that's a pretty critical point I wanted to make out. I don't know if other states have that program that are on this webinar, but I do know there are many others in the state that do, in the country that do. A couple of hurdles that do come up, financing is limited to 20% of the appraised property value. If you have any significant acreage in the Midwest, that's usually not a problem. Farm land value is pretty high around here, despite the last difficult years in New England. You have to be current on your mortgage and your property taxes. The Davis-Bacon Act may apply, which relates to fair wages in that particular area. The benefits almost have always outweighed the hurdles from what we've seen. So we have low origination fees over here. They're cash flow positive projects, meaning your tax bill may go up a little bit, but your energy savings or the kilowatt hours that you offset through use of solar are far higher than that little bump in the tax. And in addition to that, it's a job creator and maintainer. So across the state, I think we've seen over 300 PACE loans go through. Most of them have been for solar. Many of them are on farms. Next slide. So I'm going to skip this one since we already talked about it. That's all right. All right, so the REAP grant. I'm glad you have people on here that actually help with the REAP grant. The paperwork is a barrier. It is doable. As you know, some people hire a grant writer. If you're in Minnesota, or even if you're maybe in Wisconsin or Iowa and you're looking for help, you're welcome to approach us. We do have plenty of resources and templates. If you want to hit advance one time, just for fun. I do get that kind of call a lot, where people throw their hands up in frustration and they say, I can't believe you sent this to me. how can you help me? And so my job is to help people get across the finish line. Oftentimes I'll send them the documents, and they'll show me the vendor quote. I'll kind of guide them to put things in the right places, but at a certain point, they might get a little bit frustrated and call me back and say, can you help me? And that's what we do. Our job is not to step on the toes of private grant writers. If several $100s stands in the way of you in a grant application, we'd rather that not happen. So we will get you to the point where the application goes in, because you cannot score if you don't shoot. And that's our objective. So next slide. So tax matters. I'll go quickly. So everybody knows, or you should know about the 26% investment tax credit that steps down at the end of this year. It does have a carry forward provision. So if you are not sure about your tax liability as a farmer or a rural small business, you might want to talk to your accountant to make sure that you can capture the full value of that tax credit. Next slide. Depreciation is also really important. So solar is considered energy property. Energy property, whether it be an oil derrick or a wind turbine, has a 5-year property schedule. And that's relevant because if you maintain your profitability, you're able to nip at the upfront value of that upfront investment of that solar array over a 5-year schedule, in addition to the investment tax credit, which typically shrinks the cost recovery by several years. And in the ideal case, it's usually around like 6 or 7. I've seen farmers make that cost back. And the technology, as Autumn mentioned, has about a 30-year lifespan. Next slide, please. So my particular role here is, like I said, I work for CERTS, but we have an initiative called the Renewable Energy for Greater Minnesota program, something that we've been doing, I think this is our 5th year now. I do the solar site assessments for farms and small businesses. So if we have an initial conversation, kind of do a checklist. If you have some questions, I'll do a desktop study. I will drive out to the farm to talk to you and kind of walk the property to see what kind of barriers may or may not be in the way for solar. Like I said, we do application support for grants like USDA REAP, and then also Minnesota does have a livestock investment grant program that we've worked with in the past as well. I'll provide you that guidance on federal tax credits and depreciation, and then talk about other financing opportunities like PACE. So basically everything I just told you, we help you with. So that's it. That's me. If you have any questions, and I believe my time is up.
Thank you, Fritz. Appreciate that. And Minnesota has some really great programs and incentives. So thanks for shining a light on that. Next up, we have Jesse Gandy, Rural Business Service Specialist and Energy Coordinator with USDA Rural Development. So you get to hear it from the horse's mouth, our next couple of presenters, the USDA in the house. And Jesse is based here with me in West Virginia. So take it away, Jesse.
Thank you, Autumn. I appreciate being characterized as a horse. I am a big, huge fan of the equine industry. Here in West Virginia, we have a variety of different REAP projects. And so I really wanted to focus on what we're doing with Autumn here in West Virginia and how our program operates. The details of the program have really been presented, but I want to start with this nice, lovely picture of a rural town in America. The Rural Development is the only agency that can build a community from the ground up. We have over 40 different programs. We used to be called the lender of last resort, but now we've become one of the largest lending entities in the world. So if you have any financing needs, please feel free to call me, email me, and we can help with a variety of things, from rural utilities to community facilities, and also for energy needs through the REAP program. So my main focus is REAP. You can go to the next slide, Autumn. It shows my contact information. Like I said, if you have any questions, comments, please feel free to email me at any time. The key to the REAP program, especially in the state of West Virginia, is word of mouth. Basically, our best outreach tool is shaking folks' hands and getting to know farmers and small businesses, and passing my card out to folks. And if you need assistance in something else, like the community facilities program or the rural utilities program, or even in housing, give me a call and I will assist you and guide you to the appropriate person. And over time, I've been working with the agency for roughly 8 years, and I've lived in the state of West Virginia all my life. So if you're in need of some type of financial support, I guarantee you that I know somebody. And in fact, I've financed something in all 55 counties in the state of West Virginia, and I've been to every county. Really proud of that. But like I said, here's my phone number, here's my contact information. Contact me anytime. Next slide. So our portfolio in the state of West Virginia consists of mostly solar and or energy efficiency. That's what we've done in the past. A couple years ago, we had a lot of energy efficiency upgrades on a variety of farms, and that was the majority. But over time, solar has slowly taken over. We usually provide financing for between 15 to 30 projects throughout the state. It's mostly for small businesses and Main Street type of businesses. So if you're in that arena, that's who we work with the most. West Virginia is made up of small farms. We don't have large farms, but those farms are very scrappy, and they focus mostly on niche markets. And solar is perfect for that type of farm. Autumn and myself have helped people throughout the state of West Virginia and farmers that have greenhouses or have high tunnels or cold storage facilities. So these are types of folks that are trying to work their way through direct marketing or value-added products. And that's a perfect type of solar installation here in the state of West Virginia. But the current portfolio within this past year has been predominantly solar. I think 90% of our applications were solar, and I think it is tied to the tax credits, given that small businesses and farmers can obtain a 26% tax credit. So there are, basically 25% grant, which, there's not any major obligations to the grantee except for the application process. Some people think that it's onerous, but other folks believe that it's pretty simple. Compared to other programs, it is not as tedious. And usually, actually, the application process is more tedious near the approval process. Most folks that apply in the state of West Virginia are rewarded for the grant. We rarely turn anyone away, and the reason being is we have lower energy costs in the state, and so in some cases, energy efficiency is a better option than solar. But one thing I do want everybody to know is that we have plenty of guaranteed loan funds, and I ask that you work with your local lenders to possibly obtain a guaranteed loan for your solar installation or even energy efficiency upgrade. We work with credit unions, we work with any traditional lender, and most notably we work with community banks. Community banks are in need of a guarantee. A guarantee is basically additional collateral for a loan. It reduces the risk for the lender. And I really want to promote this program because financing is really important, not just for solar, but for all of the REAP projects. And what is key is working with folks like Autumn and folks like our technical systems providers that presented. And we work as a team to help support not just the solar industry, but the farmers and the small businesses. So I think that we're all collectively working together to help support our local businesses. Currently, I am not aware of any major tax incentives or incentives in the state of West Virginia. However, I think that over time that will change, or it could change. Autumn has more information than I do on that issue. But the key in West Virginia is that we work as a family, we work as partners to help develop these form of projects. And I think I'm really proud of the efforts that Autumn and I have implemented in the state. And my bottom note here, banks and financing are really important. you know, those are also a part of our community, the banks and the community banks, the credit unions. These folks need this program to help be successful. Banks really rely upon us for not just the solar guarantees, but for a lot of guaranteed programs. And so get them involved early, you know, tell them to give me a call. We're happy to help support their efforts. And they're the ones that really can pull you through the process and make this a reality. Next slide. This is our logo. I don't have much to say, but it's a pleasure to present today, and I'm happy to answer any questions, make any additional comments as needed.
Thank you so much, Jesse. Appreciate that. And all your work here in West Virginia. So moving right along with this USDA Rural Development Team. Next up is Rory Pirmatai, a loan specialist from Pennsylvania. So take it away, Rory.
All right. Am I unmuted then?
You are good. I can hear you.
All right, Autumn. And I want to thank Sun as well for having me this evening. I'm Rory Pirmatai. I've been with Rural Business for about 8 years after retiring out of the Air Force. But I have some 12 counties under my belt here in Pennsylvania. I do handle a majority of the rate, not because I'm any kind of great marketer, just because I have a lot of farmland within my territory. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm not going to go over stuff that we already did, but I just want to drill down a little bit on some of these other items. Again, you see the rural small business. It has to be in a rural area, whereas ag producers can be pretty much anywhere in the state of Pennsylvania. For example, I have a retired Penn State professor that had a building. He wanted an energy efficient grant to put in some new insulation, some new doors, windows. And then he wanted to power everything with solar panels, which we did another grant for him. And he was a hydroponic grower. So he's growing hydroponics right in Philadelphia. Cuts down on a lot of the transportation costs. Vegetables are there a lot fresher. And then once he got up and running, he asked for a value-added producer grant from us, which he got. So he expanded his product line. And I guess the point of this is that, you know, I'm trying to get these folks in the city and like Jesse said, word of mouth is the only way we can get there. So, but definitely want to get more people in the inner city to take advantage of our programs, at least the ag producers anyhow. Next, please. So if you go to, there was a website up here, but anyhow, if you go to our Google USDA eligibility area, you'll pull up a map similar to this, and you click on business, and you can zero in and just keep clicking in on a specific area, or you can type in an address, and it'll tell you whether it's in an eligible area or not. Again, just Google USDA eligible areas, and this map will come up. And as you can see, the orange, well, the orange territory back in here, like in New York and Philly, those are ineligible for businesses. So, and that, the legend will tell you that. So, next, please. Not so much energy efficient. I want to just hit on what Fritz said, and that's what's kind of trending in Pennsylvania is the lighting, the LED lighting. We have a lot of factories, a lot of businesses, and even dairy farms that are switching from the old incandescent to the LED lighting. Not only is it inexpensive and it's easy to do the project, because of the simple payback of the project, it usually floats its way to the top of the funding list. And that's important because we get a lot of our lighting projects always, I haven't seen one not funded yet. So, but certainly, and you'll see later on here on the slide, solar by far is our best seller. Next, please. Eligible project costs, as you can see to the left and right. Some of the things that aren't listed in the ineligible is, you know, we don't do golf courses. We don't do certain businesses like generate most of the revenue through gambling proceeds and some other businesses that are seedy that we don't mess with. But and we can't do tractors and things like that. But you know, when it comes to solar and retrofitting, for example, I just gave a grant to a mushroom farm out here, and they had retrofitted panels on their barns. So we can certainly do those. Next, please. Again, we've seen these numbers before for minimum grant, renewable energy, 2,500, $500,000 grant requests for maximum. Next, please. There are 3 types of application levels. And with each application level and the more money you're requesting in grant funding, the more information we want from you. So when you're at the 80,000 or less, there's not a whole lot we need from you. 20,000, between 80 and 200,000. I don't want to get into the technical side of it, but we want a little bit more information about the projects, the feasibility of the project. And then when you get over the $200,000 range, that's when we need, you know, an engineer to come in and certify that everything's going to work great and no roofs are going to cave in and things along these lines. Next, please. So just to give you a snapshot of what Pennsylvania's doing these days, we received 50 applications. 24 of those were mine, by the way. Thank you very much. 38 were solar. 20,000 less or 22 applications, and they're competing for, our pot of money was 229,000. And there is 2 pots of money, make no mistake. One is for 20,000 less and one is for over 20,000, which is called unrestricted. 20,000 and less, it's easier to get funded with. I'm not going to lie about it. I mean, there's less work involved in the application process. Although folks like Sarah, we use every day. They know exactly what we want. So I welcome when folks like Sarah submit an application to me, because it's usually like no maintenance at all. So thank you, Sarah. But anyhow, for the 16 over 20,000, we have a $1.3 million, and that says state only. And the reason for that is because, like these folks here that are under $20,000, we funded several of them about a month ago, and then the rest of them went down to the national office. Now, national office will pool all the money from the other states that didn't use all their funding. So all that money gets gathered up by the national office and put in a pot, and then the applications that didn't get funded compete for that pool. And then when that's done, if they still didn't get funded, they come back to us at the state level, and then they compete with the unrestricted, which is the over 20,000 and up. So that's why I'm saying state only, because there is a chance that these things get funded at the national level. And I've had several get funded at national level. Next, please. Commercially available technology only. The reason I only put this in is because once in a while I get somebody that says, hey, my uncle designed this system that captured methane gas from this cow manure, and and they have this type of technology that has been proven, and I'm no engineer myself, so I send it down to the national office. They evaluate it and say yay or nay. So, but with solar, it's a no-brainer. It's been around for a while. So, next, please. I'm not going to get into the funding dates. I will tell you that at least in Pennsylvania, and maybe Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, we have 5 opportunities to fund 20,000 and less throughout a fiscal year. Restricted, which is over the 20,000, is only twice a year. I mean, that's what we do here. I mean, and I'm just assume that it was that way across the CONUS. So, so right now we have 20 less competing at national office. Will come back, compete with the unrestricted, and then the unrestricted will go down to national office and compete with those unused funds, and that'll be into the fiscal year till October. So, next, please. Here's just a couple of projects that we funded before. It's one of these slides has a Michigan slide in it. I'm not sure why, but anyhow, you can see You know, this is a typical, for us, for me personally, I do a lot of poultry farms, which makes sense because they have those huge barns, you know, and to HVAC those barns, it's a tremendous amount of energy. And I've seen the electric bills coming from these farmers that submit their applications, and they're horrendous. I don't even know how they can afford it. But a lot of them will do the panels, and it really will offset their electrical use, and it'll really Next slide. Thank you. Here's another business. This is an anaerobic digester. You can go on to the next one. Here's Michigan Winery. We got so many wineries around here. I'm not sure why we're using the Michigan one. But anyhow, it's looking pretty good from here. Next, please. A solar farm. We're getting a lot of these, actually. We're getting investors that come in and build solar farms, and they sell their power to a community, whether it be a cul-de-sac community, whether it be an assisted living community. But we see investors coming in really from the western part of the United States, and they're setting up shop here. And they're doing well, although that's not what the program's meant for, so they don't always score as well as, say, a sole proprietorship farm. But we tend to see a lot of the solar farms popping up. Next, please. Actually, this was one of my projects. This guy took this picture with a drone, but he actually has several of these trailer plants that they manufacture these trailers in, and he's gotten several from us. This is in Lancaster County, by the way. Next, please. Again, I think this is mine as well, but you can see all the various uses. I mean, the businesses and farms vary so much, but I do get a lot of the poultry farmers. Oh, and I wanted to mention also in that, just at the bottom it said, applied in fiscal year 2015, did not get funded, reapplied in 2016, got funded. So what does that mean? That means, like, you submit your application to us, and if it's contingent upon funding and you're not going to do it until you get funded, that's fine. You don't get funded, then let's drag it to the next year and resubmit your application with some updated information, and we can go for it again in the next year. However, if you've already started your project, you cannot, or you have done your project, you cannot submit another application in because it's already started. I guess the point being is that once you submit your application, you can start your project, but it also locks you out of submitting another application for the same project. Now, it doesn't mean you can't add on to that project down the road or do a different project like an energy efficient one. It just means that you're locked out of that particular project for us. Next, please. Dairy farms, again, I should have put in some poultry farms in here, but this is typical of what we see here in Pennsylvania. Next, please. Again, a feed mill. I think he ended up doing the roofs on the other one too, but there's just some examples there. Next, please. Here's how to apply. You can get a hold of myself or your state, USDA representative like Jesse if you're in West Virginia, and they can help you out. Although I rely on folks like Sarah submitting the applications, I also take time out to go to businesses and teach customers or solar companies on how to do the applications themselves. Occasionally I'll go out and submit it to sit down with a farmer if they have the time and show them how to do it. If not, I kind of walk them through it day by day, and it takes a while, but we get it done. So, because after all, our farmers, they're out there working their butts off, trying to just keep their head above water. They don't have time to be muddling through federal paperwork. That's why people like Sarah are so valuable. Next, please. Oh, yes, we are an equal opportunity provider and employer. I have to put this in. Next, please. All right, that's me up there. There's my number. And you don't have to be within Pennsylvania to call me and ask me some things. I don't care if you're from West Virginia or Minnesota or wherever. Call me up, say, hey, what do you think about this? And I'll give you my take on it. No big deal. Let me just quickly glance at these, make sure I covered everything. Again, I think Jesse mentioned the guaranteed loan program, which is great because folks that want to build like an anaerobic digester or even do a solar farm that lack the personal funds to commit to the project can get from the federal government up to 75% of the project costs. I mean, that's huge. And it's a guaranteed loan. So in case of default, the government's saying, hey, we're going to guarantee it. That makes the banks sleep better at night, believe you me. Let me see. I think that's all. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rory. Thank you for that. And certainly last but not least, we have Christy Sutherland with Prosperity Ag based in Indiana. And Christy is going to share with us some more of the grant writing perspective on USDA REAP. So yeah. Thanks for being with us, Christy.
Thank you, Autumn. Yeah, thank you guys for being patient. Last name Sutherland, I always get the honor of going last. So I promise you guys, I do have some new information. I knew going last that there'd be a lot already covered. So there's some slides we'll skip past, but I do have some other things to add on. You would think after all of this, we wouldn't have anything else to say, but a couple things, couple tips and tricks and stuff. So you can go to the next one, Autumn. So my company, Prosperity Ag, we are a consulting service. We are not affiliated with USDA or any other organization. Our full-time jobs are grant writers. We have been really successful with USDA programs, particularly REAP. We do hundreds of these applications. In fact, we've worked in 38 states and 2 US territories. You know, it's a similar program throughout every state, so it's easy for us to adjust our work to wherever you're located. And so, you know, we've had a really great opportunity to connect with lots of people all across the United States, whether it is for grant writing for the REAP, or like one presenter mentioned, some feasibility studies are sometimes required, and we can help with those too, especially on those guaranteed loans, because we all need more of those loans to be submitted. So you can go to the next one, and you can skip this. Everybody's seen this one. Talk to just a little bit about the basics. And then I think the next slide, again, a little bit about some of the projects. We do see mostly solar in the projects that we work with, but honestly, energy efficiency is the next highest. We do a lot of grain dryers, lots and lots of those. People need those replaced. And usually that's a good introduction to kind of introduce them to solar, because they're looking to offset as much as they can. And you can go to the next one. So a little bit to talk about the application process, because we haven't really talked much about what to expect on that. As some people have mentioned, it is a very technical application. When you think grants, a lot of people think, you know, let us tell their story and they'll be so excited to fund us. It doesn't work that way with this program. You could be doing the best work ever, but it's all very technical. It looks at, you know, exactly what you're going to be offsetting and how this might impact your operation that way. It does seem very daunting when you get the packet. The USDA reps are amazing at helping, but you can still get that packet and be like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? And so sometimes it can just kind of be like you're speaking a different language and you just don't really know what to do. USDA is great. The rural development folks are there to help you. Not all grant programs are like that. You can't always reach out to folks to get help with an application, but USDA is there. But as I'm sure everybody knows, they've got a lot of other things that they're working on too. So the amount of help will probably depend on, are you calling a week before the due date? Are you, you know, how far along in the process are you? So it's all going to depend, you know, the help that you might get probably going to vary on your project, but definitely do reach out to them. I tell everybody they need to know about your project. They want to hear about it. They want to see if they can give you some tips. If nothing else, then you know, people like Rory and Jesse will know who you are when their application comes across their desk. So definitely reach out to them. One thing to note is that all applicants have to have what's called a DUNS number and a cage code. These are incredibly important and incredibly frustrating. A DUNS number allows you to do business with the federal government. The cage code allows the federal government to direct deposit money into your bank account. The DUNS number is pretty simple, but the cage code is not fun. Anybody can probably tell you that's been involved with this. If you put a comma in the wrong place, you got to start all over. So definitely start that as soon as you think you might apply for the grant program. I know some rural development offices have been pretty flexible that have allowed us to at least start the process and not have to have it active. But those are so key and also very frustrating. So those are good to know ahead of time. And you can go to the next one, Autumn. And then, so let's talk a little bit about the timing, because it's definitely, we've talked about when the applications are due, but there's a little bit more to that. So even though there are due dates for the applications, we can submit that application at any time. If the application is due March 31st, we could still submit your application April 1st. It's just not going to be considered until that next applicable due date. This comes up with us a lot because people will, you know, during the summer, they want to get their solar projects in. There's not a due date for quite a while. So it's important to know you can go ahead and submit it. You're just going to be waiting a while until you hear from USDA. So basically what we'll tell people is you have that due date will come and go. So let's say, for example, it is that March 31st due date. You have about 60 to 90 days after that due date to find out whether or not you got funded. Every round's a little different. We just usually say 60 to 90 is kind of like a safe bet. So if you submit your application in June, you're waiting a year. But in all honesty, most of the projects we work with, they are wanting to do this project no matter what. And so that's okay with them, that they will be waiting. So that's always important to know. Your construction, though, cannot begin until the USDA receives and accepts your application. So even if we were to submit it April 1st, we've got to give them some time to accept it. They will review it to make sure it's complete. They're not going to score it, but they're just going to make sure it's complete. And then they'll issue you an accepted application letter. So it just says, yep, we've got your application. If you're going to be doing construction, make sure you adhere to all the environmental requirements. We'll be in touch. And then you can also not include any down payments made prior to that application acceptance in that. So if you do a down payment, that's okay. We just can't include that in the grant request at all. And so I know a lot of companies do require that kind of to even engineer. So that's something we need to talk through and we can help people with that, of course. So all that being said, you can go ahead and get the project done. You can start it, you can complete it before you even know whether or not you got the application. And sometimes that can help when it comes time to do the follow-up paperwork at the end. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So some tips, this is always going to start with a vendor quote. We can have conversations, you guys can talk to USDA, you can talk to people like Sarah ahead of time, but really we want to make sure that you know exactly what you're going to be installing. We can't just come up with an idea and say we think we're going to install 50K, but we don't know who's doing it. You definitely need to know who you're using, what kind of equipment they're using, all of those details. And like Sarah said, we can pre-score these projects. They're so important to pre-score. It is a competitive program. I'm sure most states, I don't know of any states that are not oversubscribed, which means they're getting more applications than they have money. So we want to make sure that if we do a pre-score, we have a really good chance of being funded. Now, the pre-score doesn't guarantee funding. It just means we're giving you the best chance. Every state is different. Every round is different. So we're just kind of doing our due diligence ahead of time. So once you get that vendor quote and you kind of feel comfortable moving forward, like we talked about, get those federal registrations started, at least get that ball rolling. And then that's when you're going to start gathering your materials. There is a lot of supporting documents with this grant on top of the forms that you'll need to fill out. Sometimes it just takes some time. You know, you've got to get your tax returns, you've got to get your articles of incorporation. It can take some time, more time than most people think. And then once you've got all that together, that's when you can start completing the application forms. You'll want to work with your solar vendor. You're going to want to work with USDA to ask questions and kind of put that together and get all of that completed. And then once that's done, you can go ahead and submit that application. And then here's the question we always get: what happens next? You gotta pack some patience because it does take a little while to find out whether or not you get funded. So you just have to wait. It's kind of one of those, we'll call you, don't call us. USDA will notify you. They're gonna let you know once you get funded, but calling them every week isn't going to help anything. Calling me every week isn't gonna help anything. You know, we just kind of have to be patient with that. If your project is done and installed and running by the time you get notified that you've been funded, the USDA will be notified. You'll get some closing documentation, and everything will kind of flow. If you haven't started the construction project, they'll ask for some status reports as that project is getting completed. And some states will do what they call a site visit. Once the project is complete, they'll have you fill out some of that closing document paperwork. Not every state does that. It's just kind of up to preference. And then after the project has been funded and you've got your direct deposit from USDA, there is some annual reporting. The nice thing about solar projects in particular is there's usually monitoring software. And so you can use that monitoring software to complete those reports, along with USDA again, because you're going to get those forms and be like, I have no idea what to fill out here. Let them know you're not sure what to do, and they'll help you out. Okay, and then here's the questions we always get: what to expect if you're using a grant writer. You know, we do so many of these projects that's usually the question we get is, you know, what can we expect once we move forward with you? So most of us will have some kind of contract or agreement up front to the terms. Make sure you read that, make sure you're okay with it. It's gonna lay out what exactly the grant writer will do and what you will be responsible for. It's going to allow you a simplified application process. I do dozens of these every round. Where you've never done one, it could take you, 20 hours to do it. It could take me 3. It just kind of depends on the project. It depends on, what's going on. I kind of tell people every single project always has a hiccup of some sort. We never know what it's going to be, but it's always going to be there. And I have the resources, or people like Sarah have the resources to know how to navigate through that. And we'll be able to kind of guide you guys to know, like, hey, we got to start this early. If you're calling me a week before it's due, we're going to have a conversation about what do we do. And so kind of the grant writers will act as a navigator for you through the process. We'll be a liaison between the solar developer to make sure we've got the information we need. And then we'll also be the liaison between the USDA. So for the projects that I work on, those USDA reps know to call me with questions. They're not going to get the answers they need from the applicants themselves, so they'll call me, which most people would prefer. They're not going to always want to have the USDA call them with questions. And then we're also a contact to reach out. If you get that paperwork to close out your grant from USDA and you don't know what it is, you can reach out to that person that assisted you with the application process. And that's all I've got. I think we've got everything covered at this point now, hopefully.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Christy. That was really useful. And I feel like we covered a ton of information. We rounded it out. The USDA Rural Development Rep from Indiana wasn't able to join us today, but she wanted to make sure I was shining a light on the solar growth in that program. Unfortunately, the slide looks slightly cut off, but
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, we lost Autumn. We're left to our own devices here, everyone. All right, I'm gonna step in and say, it seems like there's been some good questions in the chat, so why don't we go to the chat and answer a few?
Sure.
Let's do it.
I guess I'll jump in real quick on the question of how long it takes to prepare an application. So Christy shined a good light on how it depends. Every application does have its issues. Again, each project is unique, and so some projects, you know, there's just a wide variability in what you may or may not already have on hand, like your SANs and your DUNS numbers. If you're already registered and you can get right into the system, that is a breeze. If you're not, it's a process, and a lot of people get caught up because that's step one. But there's also, of course, rounding up tax return information. Sometimes that can be a bit time intensive. Our best practice is that we ask each applicant to dedicate a person who can answer the questions on a regular basis, whether that's the business owner or their administrative assistant, someone that we can reach regularly and quickly to get through each of these specific steps. And so, yeah, it can take, I think, for us, we typically dedicate 4 weeks, but sometimes it takes up to 6, sometimes 8 weeks. It just depends. Welcome back, Autumn. We just jumped on and,
Sorry, everyone. My power flashed out. So that was terrible timing, and sorry to leave you all hanging like that. Thanks for covering for me, other presenters.
We're glad you're back.
Yeah, let me get back to sharing my screen so I can just wrap this up. I was sharing about REAP in Indiana. Can everyone see my screen again?
Oh, yeah.
Great. So solar continues to trend upward in terms of the number of applications throughout our states. And I just want to kind of wrap up the rudely interrupted presentation just to give you a little bit more information about Solar United Neighbors, kind of close the loop in what kind of services we can provide in addition to all the great services that these other presenters provide to REAP participants. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We help people go solar, we educate about solar, and we advocate for solar. We work in 12 states around the nation, and we are growing with the intention of being in all 50 states and serve as nationwide solar advocates and resources for solar owners and solar supporters. And we help people go solar a couple of different ways. We develop local solar bulk purchase programs or buying clubs that we call solar co-ops. And so you can visit our website, solarunitedneighbors.org, to find out if there's a local solar co-op available in your area. If that's the case, it's a great way to go solar with the the bulk purchase power of a local group to get really competitive pricing. And we serve as a consumer advocate throughout that entire process and help facilitate those programs. If you're not in an area with a Solar United Neighbors solar co-op, don't despair. We also offer individual consulting and technical assistance through our membership program. So anyone, anywhere can become a Solar United Neighbors member, and we can help you work through your individual project that way. We also offer REAP grant writing assistance and technical assistance for people negotiating that REAP process. You can visit the website solarunitedneighbors.org/REAP to find out more about the program and what we offer. And there's tonight's webinar being advertised on the page. So, you know, to get in the door for our REAP services, you become a member, which is an $85 annual fee. And then we start with a $200 introductory fee, and it goes up from there based on the, you know, the complexity of the project and the hours that are involved. And of course, depending on where you're located, there are other wonderful grant writers like Christy and Sarah, and your USDA Rural Development, and Fritz in Minnesota can help you with stuff. So there's a lot of different opportunities out there for assistance if you want to look into this, this REAP grant. Just very quickly, I'll just shine a light on some of our West Virginia projects with REAP funding. Diversified fruit and vegetable operation. This was a grass-fed meat farm that participated in our National Solar Tour, which is a really fun annual event for solar owners all around the country. We're doing some digital programming as well this year, so there's going to be lots of cool opportunities to see solar in your community this fall, the first weekend of October. So be sure to check out nationalsolartour.org to get involved in that. This is a solar plus storage project that was funded in West Virginia's Eastern Panhandle, a dog training and boarding operation. And a fish farm that we helped get up and running with REAP funding in 2018, and he was so happy with it, he applied and got funding for an expanded solar array the next year as well. So that is the end of our presentation this evening. Again, I'm Autumn Long, Regional Field Director with Solar United Neighbors, and I want to thank each of our presenters again for spending these hours with us. We are a little bit over time. We have the room until 9, so if anyone needs to leave now, presenters, I thank you for sticking with us. I do want to make sure we're able to answer questions that have rolled in, so if you're able to stick around, we can talk a little bit longer with questions that have come in, and hopefully some of those questions have been answered over the course of this webinar. I had a few noted down, and there was one question about whether REAP funding is applicable for new energy efficient appliance installations or if it must be a retrofit. So if somebody plans to install, say, new energy efficient refrigeration equipment, is that something they could do with REAP funding? I'll let one of my panelists answer that.
There is a way to do it. You can sit there and look at, you know, for example, I had a building one time and the gentleman had another building that was heated and this other building wasn't. So we looked at the building that was heated and we took the historical energy costs from the other building and applied it towards the new building to give us an idea, and that was acceptable. So I guess it depends. Sometimes our regulations are open to interpretation. I think, Jesse, I know I have issues with it. I might say yes to one thing. I might have a coworker say to another thing. So, but I mean, generally speaking for me, and I think it says in the regulations 4280B that if you can get somebody, a qualified individual to say, hey, this is what it's going to cost if you had an old inefficient one in there, and maybe go with that one, or if there's an old inefficient one in another building that they're using, you know, you can always bang those numbers up against each other. So that's been my experience.
I think Rory makes a good point there on the historic usage. data that's needed. The USDA needs to see 12 months of energy, electricity bills in order to gauge how much electricity will be replaced with solar panels. So if it's a new construction building and you don't know how much energy you're going to use with your refrigeration systems or whatever it is that you're using the building for, that is tricky. And I'm glad to hear that Rory's up for those workarounds. Our USDA director is a little more picky about that, but we try. I've put a few projects out that have we've done our best for some creative interpretations, and some have worked and some haven't. So that is more challenging when you don't quite know how much of energy will be replaced.
And I'll add too that we've had some projects, like Rory said, where we compared one to the other, and for a while they worked, and then recently, at least the projects that I proposed in Indiana, they said no more. It needs to be something that's existing. So I think the key here is you need to talk to USDA to get their interpretation from where you're located.
Thank you for that. That's all really, really helpful. We've been getting some questions about whether REAP funding can be used for off-grid solar installations or whether it needs to be grid tied. Can someone speak to that?
So historically, in the past, our regulations did not allow for it, but within the past 4 to 5 years, we have allowed for off-grid solar installations.
Yeah, that's true, and we have too. There's things in there about power purchase agreements with electric companies that won't apply to that particular situation. So, I mean, those are the things you got to kind of work around again.
And
so those systems are really good whenever you have solar that is connected to an irrigation system, and it's connected to within a very large farm, and they're used for pumps. Right. And assisting in cattle operations. And that is eligible.
Yeah, we've had some projects that were irrigation, but we've also had, I don't know about you guys, but I get the question about batteries a lot. And I have had a couple projects with batteries, but as we mentioned, it looks at the return on investment, and that batteries just skyrocket that return on investment. So that's something that people will need to weigh and get that pre-score to determine, is it worth applying with the batteries, or do we need to look at something else?
So it really depends on the state that you are in. So in West Virginia, the majority of the applicants are awarded. So if you do have a low payback, just as Christy was describing, because of the batteries, in some states you're going to get kicked out. And that's probably the case in, say, Ohio or Pennsylvania, and you may compete in our national funding pool. But here in West Virginia, luckily, that would likely be funded. So we've had several battery systems that were awarded that were connected to solar installations in our state.
And because we are over time, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. If folks had questions for any of us that you weren't able to get answered or that you didn't hear the answer to over the course of this webinar, please follow up with us. We'll be circulating the recording as soon as it's finalized and available. We'll include contact information, and we've got a ton of great resources here, sort of the brain trust for our region with REAP. So I really appreciate everyone's time this evening. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, panelists, for your expertise. And we hope you all will continue to spread the word about solar and the USDA funding that's available to support it. Thanks, everyone, and good night.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.